Today on Technado, we're talking with Corey Thuen, the co-founder of Gravwell, about their data analytics platform and all the fun they've been having with big data in this past year. That's all coming up on Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to Technado. I am your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I am joined here by Don Bezet. Don, how are you doing?
I am doing great. Excited about our interview today.
Yeah, and this is an interview with someone that we've actually talked to in the past here on Technado. Last year, you went to the Wild West Hackin Fest out in Deadwood, South Dakota, and we brought back a lot of interviews. And honestly, I'm not just saying this. This one was my favorite from last year.
Yeah, and I love it when we meet companies in the early stages, right? When they're in beta or alpha, they're not public yet, and then they, over the course of a year, just get really successful and turn around a commercial product and actually go to market. And Gravwell is an example of that. So we did get a chance to meet them when they were very young, and today it's changed a lot. So having Corey come on the show with us and talk about everything that's new in the next year is really exciting. You'll definitely want to check out this interview.
Yeah, and we've talked about the Technado bump before where, we've interviewed someone and then, 2 weeks later we're looking at a news article about them being acquired, getting another seed round of funding. So as a second interview, I mean...
They should get double acquired.
Yeah, they're going to be, it's a billion-dollar company next week, no doubt. But let's go ahead and get to that interview, and we'll talk with Corey and find out what they've been up to since the last time we spoke and what's new from Gravwell. That's coming up right after this break.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used ITProTV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without ITProTV I wouldn't be where I was today because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
All right, welcome back to Technado. As promised, we have an interview now with Corey coming to us all the way from Idaho, right, Corey? Is that where you're at?
That's right, beautiful, gorgeous Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
I don't know how I figured that out. Well, so Corey, you're with Gravwell. Can you just give us a little bit of background about who Gravwell is?
Yeah, Gravwell. So we're a new startup in the analytics space. We're coming in. This is our just hit our first year anniversary, actually, from launching the company, where we got our initial seed funding through Gula Tech Adventures. Ron Gula, who founded Tenable, of course, great to work with, fantastic portfolio. So we're excited to be in that. But the tech has sort of been something that we've been developing for a while, because really myself and my co-founder were practitioners. We were trying to use other analytics tools like Splunk and Elk, and running into some problems that just weren't being addressed by the market. So we're either idiots or geniuses, and decided to tackle those problems and create something, create the solutions that we ourselves needed. And
well, yeah, so and that seems like a story for a lot of companies is, we used the competitor and we just couldn't get around some issues, and so it was just better to create our own, and because you're not, of course, the only ones that are dealing with those problems. So can you get a little bit more into detail about what were some of those things that you saw with the competitors, and how have you addressed that in your product?
Yeah, so in analytics, there's sort of two camps for how data is approached, right? You've got sort of the structure on right, more structured approach to data analytics, which will be like your Elk or even a traditional relational database. I guess that would be terrible for this use case, but where you have to know something about the fields when you take them in. And then that provides you certain things so that when they're coming in, you can do things like we can use web logs as an example. You're taking web logs, you're keeping track of how many 500 errors there are. You're doing some and interfacing those and logging them. And then there's sort of the other approach, which pretty much the only tool out there that takes it this way is Splunk and now Gravwell, where you're doing the structure on read, totally data agnostic when it comes in. So you're not looking at the fields when it comes in, and then when you issue the query, that's where the tool is figuring out, okay, what are the fields? Do they match? How am I finding the thing that I need? And those are usually a lot more time series oriented. So when we're coming at the problem, we needed something that would solve it in that totally unstructured way, because I mean, I don't know what your experience is, but especially when you're doing security in different organizations, the data types can vary wildly, even from the same vendor. So being able to just take it in, ingest first and ask questions later was pretty important. Actually, do you guys read XKCD? There was a pretty funny comic just last week that was along this line, where somebody, I put together an analytics platform, and then the anomalous input broke the whole thing, because that's the problem that you sort of run into with something like some of the challenges for doing something like ALK is if you run into some unexpected input or things get weird, then it can break your entire system, instead of if you're just taking it in first and then you're searching through it and digging through it afterwards, then it makes that a lot easier. And then there's trade-offs in how they approach that data from those two perspectives. And that one is sort of really good. The weblog example that I gave, where you're just sort of counting those. So if you ask that other platform, how many 500 errors do I have? That pops up instantly. Whereas something with like Splunk or Gravwell, there's shortcuts and ways that you can optimize this, but essentially you have to look at all the logs and count them over a period of time and then get your answer, which is not a great way to solve that specific question. But when you need to do analytics where you're looking over and you don't know what you need to know, and you're doing those aggregations, then it's the only way to go, because otherwise you're in sort of a world of hurt for performance and whatnot with the other perspective for how that goes.
That makes sense. So do you focus on specific vertical markets then, like the changes you've made and the things that make you stand out from Splunk and the others in the space? Do those suit themselves to certain types of businesses more than others?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, our background is in security, and so especially when you're doing security with like IoT or OT stuff, you kind of need to get down into the binary protocol side of things. So one of the changes that we made was making sure that we can natively handle that binary, because converting it to text was one thing that was killing us, that we were experiencing. So just being able to handle that is a clutch, and making sure that we're making use of the resources. But sort of the lie about data analytics is that, I mean, analytics are analytics. If you're doing math and looking for anomalies and doing that kind of thing, then it doesn't matter if you're looking at financial data or login data or web log data. Like you're still trying to come up with similar insights on how that goes.
So, I went through a bit of an exercise earlier this year with our own site, ITProTV, where we get a lot of traffic on the site from various places. We get a lot of attack traffic because people do that. And we need reporting on that. And in the past, I know when it's been like smaller systems, I've just dumped syslogs into a location. Syslog followed a fairly standard pattern. But when weblogs, I'm finding where Nginx and Apache and our web application firewall, they're all generating log files in slightly different formats. And when I was dumping that, I've had to use other tools to kind of like translate that data to get it where it was all normal, all in the same kind of format. In a relational database, I could index things, which made it a little bit faster to go and query and go against it. But it is just a huge amount of data. So when you take in large amounts of unstructured data, how, like from a technical standpoint, you don't have to give away the secret sauce or anything, but how do you handle that? How do you run a query on something that the data has never been seen before, and it's got to parse through potentially terabits of data?
Yeah. Yep. That's a great question. And that is where the bulk of our sort of, I guess, secret sauce, as you say, is at. That's where most of our engineering has gone into, is making that fast, because we looked at other stuff like Elastic or just running on raw Hadoop or some of the other time series databases out there like InfluxDB, and we were having troubles getting them to do what we needed. So we had to create this custom solution. So everything that we did is from the ground up, written in Go for our purposes. So that's where our secret sauce is at. And there's a reason why Google invented the Go language, because it does really well for concurrency stuff and sort of the paradigm of computing today. And for the foreseeable future, you need to be able to scale wide. You need to be able to break stuff up into small pieces and compute those in tons of different places. And that's basically how we approach the data. Is we will split that up into shards and send that around to the different aspects of a cluster. And then when you run the search, it can do as much of that processing as it can right where the data is sitting natively, so that as you're digging through it, you get the insights that you're looking for. Because there's tremendous amounts of data that are being generated by everything, and that's only going up as we're going forward. And when your dishwasher starts creating logs to go alongside your web logs, then things get pretty crazy. Yeah, it's an interesting problem.
Yeah, and you mentioned Elasticache. We actually tried that one here. Elasticache, or the Elk stack in general, right? So just Elk, it does a good job of handling huge amounts of data and rendering it in a nice little web interface. But on the back end, I found it was really complex to get configured and get set up. That we needed 6 different nodes, a couple of different clusters in place to be able to properly handle all the information the way they wanted it to. What does the deployment of Gravwell look like? Is it similar to that?
No, God, no. Because that is a huge thing. So, I mean, Elk is free, right? It's free, but it's not, because, like you said, you got to dedicate resources. You got to do care and feeding of this thing. And that's the challenge. So that's one of the benefits to our approach with that ingest first, ask questions later, is deployment is super rapid. And we've got Docker images, we've got some other community created scripts for helping to make that more efficient. But you can get up and running with a Gravwell cluster in 5 minutes. And we have a blog post that helps walk people through that. But that is a really nice part about, again, Go is a nice language that way, in that it's just a single static binary. So putting that in a Docker container or in an AWS image or whatever is super, super fast on getting that up and running.
One of the other things that I bumped into at the time, and this was probably 6 months ago, so the industry's changing very fast, but was just the sheer amount of logs that we were generating. And where I was concerned was, when I really care about my logs is usually when I'm under attack. And when we're under attack, we're getting a lot of logs. And so some of the other vendors we were looking at build per log message. and that was really interesting to me, because it discouraged you from logging, but that was kind of the whole purpose of having the solution, right?
Yeah, that is honestly something that I'll rant about for hours on end, is that exact problem. Yeah, so when you need the tool the most and you're generating more information, when you have to pay for every drip of information that you're putting in the system, it's a self-defeating cycle where you can't even use the tool for what you wanted it to do. And that's something that a lot of our customers are really interested in, because we solve that problem with an all-you-can-ingest model. So for us, we bill more like VMware, right? Where you have how many nodes are in your cluster. That's sort of how we scale with a larger organization. But however much data you want to ingest, we don't care. We say go nuts. It's your data, it's your license. You already paid for the license, you paid for the infrastructure, you paid for your hardware or whatever you've got. So yeah, that's our opinion. It's just use it, because that pricing model is just nonsense. And it's been interesting. I mean, I have an engineering background. I've done security research, vulnerability analysis. I write code. But this aspect of the company, this sort of accidentally solving this major pain point in the industry, from a business perspective, is what's really appealing to a lot of customers. And I wish it was the technology. I wish the technology took the forefront, just because that's what I think is the coolest thing. But hey, I'll take it. If we can help you with the billing thing, and that's how we get it, start the conversation, then awesome. I would love to help free people from the chains that they get stuck in because of those licensing fees, like you said.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that Gravwell can do. I mentioned that I had interviewed you, or you and someone other, or 2 people actually, that I interviewed back at Wild West Hackin Fest, and we talked a bit about the information you had gathered from when the FCC was doing public comment on net neutrality. And it was in the news. Most people saw where apparently a huge amount of the submissions for comment were either automated or canned, bot responses, cloned responses, that kind of thing. you guys fed all that into Gravwell, and at the time you're still a very young company, and I can't recall if you even had a commercial offering back then. It was a little more on a one-to-one basis or something.
Yeah, we were in beta stage at that point. Yeah.
Okay, so what's happened since then? Any big projects, or is that FCC stuff evolved anymore? What are some of the other cool things that have been kind of going on in the background?
Yeah, that's the FCC stuff has been back in the news. I actually saw an article this week about another separate. It was a university, I believe. Sorry, I wish I had that.
Yeah, it was Stanford.
I've
got that here. They found 99.7% of non-duplicated comments were actually against repeal, and it turned out, most of the comments were obviously coming from bots and things using journalists, lawmakers, dead people as the names and things. Yeah. So does that kind of line up with the findings you had?
Yeah, I was glad to see that article because it absolutely did, Peter. The findings that we saw were very similar in that when you separate out the unique comments, split out what we attempted were bots, then that was exactly what we found. But what's interesting that for us, we didn't feel like just because a comment wasn't unique, that didn't mean that it didn't have weight, if that makes sense. Because even on both sides, you had John Oliver, and then you had other people on the other side issuing pre-canned statements. I believe in net neutrality, or I don't believe. And then so those would go in, and multiple people would submit those. So just because it wasn't unique doesn't mean that it's not valid. Mm-hmm. So we tried to come up with a couple other interesting things to try and do that analysis. But it is really nice to see that type of research corroborated. But one of the things that we've put in since that beta time is we've really expanded our machine learning capabilities, which that's a super buzzword right now, but I'm actually not a huge machine learning advocate, and I'll tell you why. So one of the things that we're currently conducting some research on is the effects of propaganda on social media. So we saw if you recall, the Twitter Internet Research Agency, I think is what it's called, but the Russian propaganda IRA, that they had that massive ban of Twitter accounts. And then there are some research firms who pulled those tweets down and put it up for use for things like machine learning. And so one of the questions that we were trying to answer was, how can we use maybe this information to see if we can analyze Reddit and see if the same type of thing is happening, on Reddit or other different social media platforms. And so we took all of those tweets, ingested them, trained a machine learning model to do some classification on comments to determine whether they were similar to or not similar to what these sort of proven Twitter accounts were doing. And so we grabbed that information, fed it in, and then we've also been ingesting every Reddit account or every Reddit comment for the last couple of years, and are able to search and perform analytics on that. And so we fed that through the pipeline, did the machine learning on there, and saw what could come out of that, see if we could identify similar, accounts causing issues. But sort of the problem, are you guys coders, have you played with code? The reason that security is a thing is because computers do exactly what your code tells them to do. And so if if you're not handling your memory or whatever, the computer doesn't fix it for you. It does exactly what you say. And that's why we have buffer overflows, and that's why we have security vulnerabilities and things. Well, machine learning really doesn't get away from that, in that it's garbage in, garbage out still. So the machine only does what you taught it to do. So when we take the Twitter data set and teach this ML to classify these comments to be whether they match this or not, they get all the other sort of subcontexts and other aspects to that content in their brains as they learn. So one of the key differences between Reddit and Twitter is the character count limit, right? And on Reddit, you can post as much as you want, but Twitter is limited. And so when you train it using Twitter data, what we found when we took and applied that to Reddit is it pulled out a lot of the similar size of comments, and a lot of the automatic Reddit bots that were posting election results and stuff like that floated to the top, which sort of is what you would expect, because they're talking about a lot of the same things, but it is not it's different. I mean, they're Reddit bots who are doing that on purpose, who are doing their job, right? They're not people coming in and trying to also talk about some of these things. And that was sort of a deficiency with the training data set, where it doesn't exactly allow you a lot of translation between social media mechanisms, which was sort of expected but unexpected in terms of what results came out of there. So we're still playing around in this space and trying to see if we can do correct training using, we also trained on a couple of the other common data sets that people do when they talk about ML, like the IMDb sentiment analysis on using all the IMDb results to say whether they like or hate a movie, and then training sentiment analysis based off of that has been kind of fun. But then you also have some issues. The FCC was a really good example of this, because true to government methodology, I suppose, voting yes or no is not a simple like, oh, I agree with this or not, because the laws can be worded as such, like, I do not think, or we will avoid putting this, right? So then your vote yes is actually a vote no for what you want. And so sentiment analysis can get a little bit tricky there, because that was the net neutrality, because it was in favor of, if you voted yes, then you were in favor of repealing the net neutrality laws. So you were anti-net neutrality if you voted yes.
Nothing like keeping it good and confusing, right? That's the
exact
part. And, you know, I guess if we want to correlate this to humans, we learn from a teacher, right? The machine learns from a teacher. The difference is we can then take that data and evolve it and go beyond the lessons we've learned. The machine really can't do that, right? It doesn't move beyond what you've actually taught it.
Oh, are we going to go on the big hate fest now of machine learning? Does that start here? Well, I wanted to ask you for. We're talking with Corey from Gravwell, one of the co-founders there, and I wanted to go back on the Reddit thing a little bit. Are we looking at specific subreddits, or are you looking just at Reddit as a whole?
Yeah, specific subreddits gets interesting, right? Because you have politically leaning subreddits that are more left or more right. And so you subclassify based off of that and doing, smaller experiments. But Reddit as a whole is something that we're certainly interested in digging through. And we have as many comments as the API will give us anyway. Whether that's all of them or not is a question for them. But yeah, so the entire thing is up for analysis.
Well, I know one of my favorite subreddits is called Data is Beautiful. And they collect, you get a lot of data analysts there with big data, and they find all sorts of really cool things, which you can do when you can handle large sets of information. So let's talk a little bit about Gravwell, the product, again, because I know when I interviewed you last, it was still in beta. It wasn't something that I could come back to the office and try, but you guys just launched a community edition a month ago. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how people could actually try this with their own data?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the community edition available now. That's free. There is a data cap limit on it. It's the only time that Gravwell ever builds or limits based on data caps, because we got to keep the lights on. I got to feed my kids. But the community edition is free for home use at 2 gigs a day. If you don't want to talk to us at all, if you participate in some customer feedback and do a short interview, then we'll double that up to 4 gigs a day. For just as a thank you for helping us out, because as a startup, that's crucial to whether we're going to make it or not, is making sure that we're listening to what the people need, right, and getting good feedback and going off of that. But we built the community edition to really enable people to do that kind of, data is beautiful stuff, and come up with really cool insights and build interesting tools that enable people to look through stuff. Because, like I said, a lot of our engineering has gone into the platform, so we can handle things at scale, which is sort of irrelevant to the community edition, but is really powerful in terms of the pivots and the ags you can do when you're doing those types of data analytics. And an aspect that we're trying to make sure that we have community feedback on is which use cases need sort of polish first. Because one of the downsides of being a startup is that we don't have, the huge community and the large amount of resources at our disposal to say, yeah, we're going to make this really nice turnkey solution for these 10 use cases. Instead, we have to prioritize and we start with 1 or 2 and go from there. So that's why, having community edition and feedback is really crucial. But if you want to download the community edition and dig through stuff and then never talk to us, that's obviously totally cool as well.
Now, if somebody wants to experiment with that, so let's say I just want to fire up Gravwell in my environment and throw a little bit of data in there just to kind of fool around with it, what would be the minimum number of resources I would need for that? Would I need to deploy in a cloud environment with some multiple instances, or could I actually just run that as a container on my own system?
Yeah, just run it. You can Docker install Gravwell latest, and you're up and running right there. So. Or use our Debian repo to apt install, and you're off to the races. And it really doesn't take resources for those types of data rates where you're doing 4 gigs a day. You can run that on real modest desktop hardware without or a laptop without any issues.
Yeah, and that's a big difference from something like Elk, where even small, you've got to set up quite a bit of infrastructure to get it going. It can be a little bit frustrating. Now, can you tell us a little bit about if we're ready to launch this as a commercial product, right? So, and I'm being a little bit self-serving here because I'm thinking about ITProTV.
Like in this analogy, we want to.
Assuming there was some company that wanted to do that, what is that? We have to engage with you individually, or it's just a simple license? What does the licensing look like on that?
Yeah, the licensing is, as a startup, one of the things that we're also trying to combat in the industry, until we get so big that we're guilty of this ourselves, is we're trying to take care of people who are using our software to do these kinds of analytics, to get the things that they want. So everybody who has a license, and even community editions people for now, get a Gravwell guide that is somebody on our team. And these are not just like customer supports that we offshore or anything like that. These are actual team members and engineers, the developers, the user interface people, to help customers use the tool and make sure that they're being successful with what they're looking for. So that's number one, is we are here to help. And then number two is, you just get a license and slap that in there, and then that activates the additional data caps, and then you're up and running. Setting up like one node, depending on how much data you're looking for, what your retention requirements are and things, then the deployments can look a little bit different, right? Because if you guys are mostly interested in, hey, we just want the data there, we're probably not going to look at it very often. But if we have an incident or something, then we'd like to have this there. Then you're fine with one node with a bucket load of storage on there, because we don't price based on storage. So you just get your node, and then if you have an incident, then you can dig through that. But somebody who's like actively querying, I want to be up on my KPIs for my business, or I want to make I'm doing active threat hunting, then you start to get into clustering and having larger clusters, because you want more compute power to be digging through that information, so you get those insights rapidly and constantly.
All right, now for our viewers, if they want to learn more or download the community edition, they can check it out on your website. It's gravwell.io, gravwell.io. But for somebody who wants to get started, somebody who's never seen the product before, how do you recommend they get in there and get started with it?
Yeah, we have a quick start guide on our documents page for the community edition. But when you sign up, it will give you that Gravwell guide. And I tell you what, just fire off an email. Hit us, and then we'll answer back or answer support. But the blog is a really great resource, because we have some like walkthrough guides. Like we have a Collect D guide that sets you up with how you monitor your infrastructure for your system and see your CPU usage, memory, disk, all that stuff. So if you're just like, what's the health of my other thing that I'm trying to watch, then that's a great use case. So yeah, the documentation quick start, the blog, and then seriously, email us. We're here to help.
I'm looking at your site now too, and what is what's the difference between the community edition and then the download trial? So with the trial, that's the enterprise edition, and I've got some more bells and whistles there.
Yeah, the trial is so the community edition is limited by data, and the trial edition is limited by time. So that's a big difference. Trial is mostly for people who would be interested in being enterprise customers or purchase customers for that side.
Makes total sense. Well, we really want to thank you for letting us know, where you guys have been this last year and all that's gone on. Anything new that maybe you can tell us about that we could expect in the next year? Where do you see this going?
Oh yeah, I hope there's lots of really cool stuff. We're Yeah, we're still improving the performance on things, and that's like we're real proud of where we're at. In fact, next month we're at Supercomputing Conference. If you're familiar with that, if anybody's in Dallas, stop by, say hi. But we're going to be in the NOC doing the security operations for that. Thanks to some. So we've actually we're rolling out more of a hybridized approach. At the very beginning of the show, we sort of talked about those two different approaches, and now Gravwell is becoming a hybrid approach there. So you can get sort of the best of both worlds. So doing those sort of needle in a haystack and more awesome stuff that you get from one approach, we're creating something that's really kicking butt in both of them. But the initial steps were we wanted to optimize for the worst case scenario, because whenever you're doing data analytics, if that's something that you've played with, you can often get into that situation where if the inputs are weird or the data is weird or you didn't know that you needed to ask this question or whatever, then we wanted to make sure that was still awesome and fast and did everything that people needed. And now we're just pouring the gravy on now. It's just it's getting better.
Fantastic. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us today, Corey. Don, any final thoughts you have there?
No, I love the fact that we got to meet them early on in the company's history, and you've grown quite a bit. You've gone through partnering up with the people over at Tenable and stuff. It's a real pleasure to see a company like you grow. So congratulations on your success.
Thanks, Don and Peter. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Hey, you guys are doing awesome things.
Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for watching this interview. But we'll be back with a little bit more Technado right after this.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. ITProTV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide, this is important for me to learn. I would recommend ITProTV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
All right. Thank you so much to Corey for joining us today, and thank you all of you for checking out that interview. And it like you said in the open, Don, it's really cool to see where they've come in a year.
Yeah, and I was being truthful in the interview. I do need to sit down and see if I can't leverage this for our weblogs, because it has been a challenge for us, and running against a data cap and paying per message stuff is a nightmare. A lot of you out there are probably experiencing the same thing, so I'll be checking that out, and who knows, maybe we'll do some training videos or something on it once we figure out how to do it ourselves.
That would be awesome. I know Splunk's been on our course list for a while of something that people are requesting. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that want to get more into that big data stuff. So this would definitely be great to get them in here. Well, we wanted to let you know about a couple things that are coming up very soon for us. We've got some webinars that are coming up this month, 2 more here in October. First of all, we have Jumping Clouds, AWS to Azure, the implications of switching cloud providers. That takes place on Thursday, October 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, at 6 p.m. GMT for those of you who like to use GMT. And that's you, Don. That's you and Wes, correct?
Yep. Yeah, we actually have 2 different webinars coming up. There's the Jumping Clouds, and there is the what's the official title of the dark web one?
Exploring the dark web.
There we go.
Is your data on the market? That one's coming up on Tuesday, October 30th. And so with the proximity to Halloween there, we're going to have a little bit of fun with that one. It will be spooky, and Don can't go in the dark web as Don, so he will be in disguise as Ron Bazette to explore the dark web. And it's not just a fun one, but it'll actually show you how you can see if your data is out there or your company's data. So definitely something interesting to check out. And you can see all the webinars coming up over at itpro.tv/webinars. Not only see the ones that are coming up, but see the ones that have already happened that you can still go back and watch the archive for. We've got a lot of great ones. Just did the top 5 pen testing tools one last week. That one was really well received. A lot of cool tools that Daniel showed off. But that's one of many, many webinars that are listed on that site, itpro.tv/webinars. So definitely check that out. Also, if you're looking to check out a subscription to ITProTV, a great way to do that would be to go to go.itpro.tv/Technado. We've got a special offer code for anyone that is a viewer here, and we want you to check that out and get 30% off your subscription for the lifetime of your account. You can also request a team demo and find out more about some of the cool things we offer for teams. That's over at go.itpro.tv/Technado, so check that out. Don, any final closing thoughts before we wrap this one up?
No, we got a lot of great stuff coming up. More interviews coming down the pipe as well. We've had a good run of interviews these last couple of podcast episodes, so look forward to more of those. If you know somebody who'd be a good interviewee or whatever, is that right? Interviewee?
Yeah.
I don't know, somebody who'd be cool to interview on the podcast, please reach out to us via social media or any other mechanism. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you and love to do more interviews that are targeted towards our audience.
Well, I'm actually going to go back and review the comments that we get on our webinars now, because now I'm assuming they're all bots. So I'm going to run these through Gravwell system and find out if any of you are actually real people or all trolls.
Russian trolls,
yeah,
everyone.
GRU and all that. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today on Technado, and thanks for always joining us and sharing with your friends and letting everyone know about how much you love it. And we will see you next week right back here at Technado.
Are you enjoying Technado? Then be sure to check out our other podcast, Ask Me Anything, where our subject matter experts answer your questions. Here's the latest episode, and here's the full playlist. And as always, be sure to subscribe to ITProTV's channel. ITProTV!